Hey y'all, happy Sunday and welcome to this week's live Q&A session. This is the portion of the show where we allow YouTube to send out notifications that we're going live. If you're watching this live Q&A on replay, please scrub ahead until this graphic disappears and the actual show begins. If you're watching live and you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and put them in the live chat. But for now, grab a beverage, sit back, and relax while the countdown timer does its thing. Then we'll get started. Hey y'all, happy Sunday. Welcome aboard. Hope everybody is doing well. Hope everything's going your way as we start counting down the days. It's getting close to crunch time. I know this is kind of like our Super Bowl season. So everybody is, busier than heck. But thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come spend a few minutes with me and the rest of the folks over here in the chat. Speaking of the folks over here in the chat, let me narrowcast for just a minute here and say welcome aboard to Madra 3212 out there in the chat. Thank you very much for becoming a channel member. I greatly appreciate it. As a channel member, you need to know that we have a members only live stream every Monday evening at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. I don't know what time zone you're in. And I post links to that over on the community tab on my uh, YouTube channel page. So if you just navigate over to my YouTube channel page over here, and then come down here, you'll see home videos, live playlists. Click on that community tab and let it load up, and then scroll down and you'll see where I post. I'm not going to show everybody. Scroll down a little bit and you'll see where I post the links to the live Q&A. It's for not a live Q&A, it's a live stream. It's for members only, and we get in, we work on projects, we take deep dives, we take shallow dives sometimes. There is no time limit. We have a great group of members, a lot of which you can see right here in the chat. You'll be in good company, and I can't. I hope you'll be there. Can't wait to see you there, and we just give it a good go and have a pretty good time. If you don't know what the heck we're talking about, or if you'd like more information on becoming a channel member, just click the little join button down there next to the subscribe button. A panel will open up and a video will play that'll tell you all about channel membership. We'd love to have you join us. It's a great group of people. Let me do not so much narrowcasting as it is taking care of some housekeeping here. Like to say hello to my buddy Steve out there in the chat with Harneal Media. He sponsors my website, which still seriously needs updating. He runs a tidy little Keebler tree over there called Harneal Media. And if you're thinking about trying to eliminate the middleman, maybe getting away from Etsy or eBay or Facebook Marketplace or however you sell your products or services, uh, there's no better way to do it than with your own website. Now, Steve can help you get that all set up, help you start a web store where you can list your products or services for sale. He can help you with getting a print on demand company set up on that website in that web store that'll take care of inventory and everything else, billing, taxation, shipping, all of that good stuff all wrapped up into one. And it works. It works. If you want to design merch, sell baseball caps, coffee mugs, T-shirts, whatever it is, hook up with Steve over at Harneal Media. You'll find a link to Harneal Media in every video on this channel. He's a friend of mine. He's very good at what he does, and he is very, very competitively priced. And you will not have any complaints about the level of service, because when you deal with Harneal Media, you deal with Steve, not some faceless, nameless person in some call center somewhere. So check him out. Again, there's a link in every video on this channel. That's Harneal Media, sponsor of Mark Lindsay CNC.com. So let's go ahead and wow, here we go. Welcome aboard, Marco Silva. Again, same invitation is extended to you. Head over to that community tab, and you'll find the link to tomorrow night's members only live stream. Got a couple of things lined up. We're going to get into a little bit of 3D work that can be done on V-Carve and Aspire. It's going to be a good time. I think it's going to be a good time. So let's get into today's topic. I'm going to go kind of back into the basics a little bit. Little bit of backstory on this. When I started making videos, I was using version 8.5, then version 9.0. And as a consequence, a lot of my Vectric for Absolute Beginners series and a lot of my V-Carving for Absolute Beginner series, both of them, uh, that information is now obsolete because the forms have changed. A lot of the processes have changed. And so you get into a situation where now I don't have an older version on this computer. So I had to take some screenshots. And you get into a situation where in the old version of V-Carve and Aspire, we had this situation. This is what the form looked like. You entered your tool up here. This is on a pocket toolpath. You set your cut depth over here. Then you had one checkbox to use a large area clearance tool. Then you would select that tool, and that was your only option. And so these older videos reflect this form. In the V-Carve toolpath, it was much the same thing. You selected your V-bit up here, then you had the option to use a flat area clearance tool, and you could select one tool, and that was it. So as a consequence, those older videos reflect that same situation. Well, now we have come into version 11.5, and if we come over here into a pocket toolpath, if I select that vector and go into a pocket toolpath, the form has changed pretty dramatically. So in the case of this pocket toolpath, I can select my basic tool that I'm going to use to pocket this out. But then I can come in and I can add another bit. For instance, let's say an 1/8 inch end mill. We'll select that and it adds it to the same list. I'm no longer restricted to adding just one extra bit for a large area clearance tool. I can add 4, 5, 6 bits. I haven't found a limit yet. So we've got a little bit more flexibility here. Now, if I go ahead and I calculate this toolpath, we see that it makes 2 separate toolpaths. I had a question the other day in a comment on YouTube asking, is this normal? And the answer is yes, this is normal. What it's doing is it's making one toolpath that uses that 1/4 inch end mill. Then it's making another toolpath that's using that 1/8 inch end mill. And that's exactly what a large area clearance tool is supposed to do. If you look at the title of this toolpath, it says Clear 1. That is your clearance toolpath, and that's fine. This one here is your final toolpath. That's using that smaller bit that's going to get in and trim right close to that vector as much as it can. Now I can turn off the visibility on this toolpath and we see how much smaller this clearance toolpath is. If I run this toolpath and kind of rock it off to the side so that you can see it, that's cleared out the bulk of the material. Now, if I come in and preview this one, it's going to go do that very slight cleanup profile pass. Now on something like this, where I've got a 4-inch diameter circle, it's not really necessary to use two different tools for this particular job. I could reset my preview, go back into my pocket, and I can just totally eliminate this tool. I can just remove it. A little word here about what I'm selecting. You'll notice I have my 1/8-inch end mill selected, and it's listed down here. If I click on my 1/4-inch end mill, now it's listed down here. This is done so that you can reset parameters on each of these bits individually. So if I need to get in and maybe change a feed rate or a depth of cut based on my material, I can just select that tool, come over here to edit, and I can edit the parameters of that tool. So if I need to change my feed rate or my plunge rate, or maybe even my pass depth, if for instance I'm cutting in foam, I can go a lot deeper than a 1/4 inch per pass. I could go a 1/2 inch per pass. Let me cancel this real quick. By using the edit button to change those parameters, I'm changing those parameters for this toolpath only. If I select the bit, then go into select, and I change these parameters, I'm changing them within the tool database for all operations coming after this. I probably don't want to do that. So I'll close that without making any changes, and I'll edit those parameters using the edit button. And again, that affects this toolpath only. Okay. And it's similar with the V-Carve toolpath. Now I'm up here in my circle layer, but I also have some text. So let me close that, make text my active layer, click off, and now I have some text out here. It's similar with a V-Carve toolpath in that I can come over here and I can click in my V-Carve toolpath. I've got my vector selected, and now I'm going to select my V-bit. I am going to cut to a flat depth. Let me stop right here and say that carving to a flat depth, there's some kind of misunderstanding out there about carving to a flat depth. I'm going to get into that in just a minute, a little bit more thoroughly here. But basically what I'm doing is I'm limiting the depth of that cut to 0.1 inches, not quite 1/8 of an inch, and about 2.5 millimeters deep is what 0.1 inches is. So okay, I'm not going to go any further just yet. I'm also selecting a 90-degree V-bit, and we notice I have use clearance tools here. I've got it checked. I've got a very large tool entered in that. That's way too big. This 1/2 inch diameter 2-flute end mill, there's no way that's going to fit in there and clear anything out. It's 4 inches tall, but that's still, it may fit here. It probably won't. So I've got that tool selected. I'm going to remove it. Now I'm going to select another tool which will better fit within that text. And I think that's probably my 1/8 inch end mill. I'll select that. So now what's going to happen is this toolpath, when I calculate it, it's also going to calculate two separate toolpaths, one for that 90-degree V-bit and one for this 1/8" end mill. This is going to be the V-Carve clear toolpath. So I've got 2 bits for this toolpath. Now, down here we get into tool-specific options. These tool-specific options will affect the clearance tool only. Whatever I set down here will not affect the V-bit. The V-bit is going to do what it has to do to carve this text out to a depth of 0.1. So this only affects this 1/8" end mill. Okay. I have a choice of using an offset strategy, which means it's going to carve in a more circular pattern, or I can use a raster strategy. With a raster angle of 0, that means this bit's going to go back and forth and clear out this way. I don't want it to do that. I'm going to go ahead and go vertically. So I'll change my raster angle to 90 degrees. I know this seems like a lot of information at once, but try to follow as best you can. What I'm doing is I'm telling this clearance tool, my 1/8" end mill, that when it comes in here and it hogs out most of this material, to do it in a vertical fashion. Okay. Now I'll come down here. I'm not going to add any more to this. I don't have a 3D model, so I don't need to worry about that. And we'll just leave the name V-Carve 1. And I'll calculate it. Now we can come in here and look at the toolpath. We can see where this is going to cut. Let me just turn off the V-Carve and we'll focus on the V-Carve 1 clearance toolpath. The bit is going to come in and start clearing this area out, going back and forth vertically, like so. Then come over and start doing this one, like so. Actually, I got that backwards. It'll start with this one. When you're attempting to read a toolpath, just know that the red lines represent rapid moves. These rapid moves are with the bit lifted up out of the material. So we're going to start with my XY0 right here in the center, and it's going to lift up, go back to a straight Z view. It's going to lift up, move down here, then plunge in and start clearing this area out. Let me rock it back again here. And you'll see this light blue line. The light blue line is a plunge move. So it's going to wrap it over. It's going to plunge down here and start clearing this out. We come over here and you'll see a green line. A green line is a retract. It's going to retract out of the material here, then wrap it over to the next position. So that's enough out of me on that. Let's go ahead and preview that one. And we see it has cleared out everything that that bit can fit down into. Now we'll come over here to the V-Carve toolpath and we can read what it's going to do. Again, the same thing. It's going to come over from my XY0 and it's going to go over to this side first. And the dark blue lines are where the cuts are actually going to be. So it will do a little bit of clearance in here, but it will cut out my square corners, come back up around this way, retract out, and move over to the next position and start carving there. Let's go ahead and preview that. And we can see that's what it's done. You do not have to use clearance tools. You can allow that V-bit to clear this entire thing out. That will save you a tool change. But what you'll end up with, if we come in here and look real close, we can see a lot of ridges in here where that V-bit went back and forth to carve out this area that was too small for that 1/8 inch end mill to get into. Now, depending upon the size of your text, that may not be a big deal to you. That may be perfectly acceptable. If you're going to fill this with a solid color of epoxy, that would be just fine. So it depends on what you're going to do. I generally find that using a sanding brush and a drill, or the Scotch-Brite radial sanding discs, is more than enough to clean this up in these smaller, tighter areas that are probably going to be painted anyway. But it's very obvious that some sanding and cleanup happened in these larger areas. So that's when I tend to use a clearance tool. Not only that, this machine's a lot faster with a 1/8 inch bit than it ever would using that V-bit to clear all this out. So now I see a question out here. Dwayne's asking, will you address the order that the carve will happen in the V-Carve toolpath, first or second listed? The order that, and I assume, Dwayne, you're talking about within the toolpath itself. The order that they're going to be calculated in, this will always be your final clearance, or excuse me, your final carve. The V-bit will always be the final carve. It will always be listed last without the word clearance, without the word clear and then 1. That's always going to be your V-bit. Your clearance bits are always going to be the end mills you select. Now, if I add another bit here, let's say a 1/4 inch end mill, and we'll select that, and we'll go raster on both of these with 90-degree raster angle. And remember, that's the 1/4 inch bit is what I have selected. The 1/8 inch bit, it remembers what we're doing. It will calculate a separate toolpath for both of these, as well as the 90-degree V-bit. So let me go calculate this. And now I have V-Carve. I have V-Carve Clear 1, which uses that 1/4 inch end mill. V-Carve Clear 2, which uses the 1/8 inch end mill. So let me reset my preview. We have all of them selected. Let me turn off these two. That's what the 1/4 inch end mill is going to clear out. Then I'll turn on this one. This is what the 1/8 inch end mill is going to come in and clear out. And then this is what the V-bit is going to come in and clear out. Now, yes, you can use multiple bits, but if it's not, strictly speaking, necessary, I wouldn't. I mean, yes, it's great to come in and clear all this out with the 1/4 inch bit. Let's again take a look at that. And that may be all you need. You may not need this 1/8 inch bit at all. So let's go back into it and let's remove that 1/8 inch bit. Before I do that, if that's not what you meant, if what you meant by that was the order that I have them listed here, let's take a closer look. If I just close this and I put my cursor over clearance 1, that is the 1/4 inch end mill. Now let's go back in here and look. That's clearance 1 because that's the first bit listed up on top. This is clearance 2 because that's the second bit listed. I can change the order, and that's also going to change the order they're calculated in, but it's only going to affect really the title of the toolpath. So let me go ahead and move that up. So now I got 1/4 inch up above instead of the, 1/8 inch up above instead of the 1/4 inch. And it automatically wants to go back to offset. I'll put it for raster and I'll calculate. And now it's telling me that my V-Carve, my 1/4 inch end mill, won't fit into the vectors. Well, we know it will, but because I'm using that 1/8 inch as the primary clearance tool, it no longer needs that 1/4 inch. So there's nothing left for it to machine away that this bit can fit into. So it just, let me go ahead and turn this one off, and that is the 1/8 inch end mill. It didn't create a toolpath. There's nothing for it to clear away because we changed the order and made my 1/8 inch first. It's going to calculate that first. Then there's nothing left for the 1/4 inch to carve away. So let me move that back down and we'll calculate. And now it calculated them just fine, knowing that clear 1 uses the 1/8 inch end, or excuse me, the 1/4 inch end mill, and clear 2 uses the 1/8 inch end mill. So if you want to use the V bit first, as you advocate, before the clearance, adjust in the toolpath window, no. It depends. Well, let me back up and regroup on that. The software is always going to calculate the V-bit toolpath separately without a clearance identifier at the end. So that's always going to be a separate toolpath. These are also separate toolpaths. Now it gets down to how you save your G-code. If you use a post processor that recognizes an automatic tool changer, you can save this all to one piece of G-code. But if you don't use a post processor that recognizes an automatic tool changer, you would save this off into separate toolpaths. Now, as Dwayne hinted, I'm an advocate of running the V-bit toolpath first. And that's mainly because I find I get a better outcome. So let's run that V-bit toolpath first. What it does, it has support all the way around the entire vector. In this particular instance, it's not really easy to see, but like for instance, down here where you've got this inside angle for the letter M, if I have already cleared all of this out, then I come back and run my V-bit, there's a distinct chance that I can chip off the tip of this M and break it loose. if this has already been cleared out, because there's no support around it. But by running the V-bit first, it's going into a solid piece of material. Everything is nicely supported. So that comes down, Dwayne, to just running this toolpath first. Then come back and I'll run that toolpath, then come back and run this toolpath to clean up the rest of it. So I just prefer to use all of my V-bit toolpaths first. So there's really no adjustment needed up here in the toolpath order, because this toolpath order will only affect your clearance tools. Okay, this will not affect the V-bit at all. That's always going to be separate. And that's always going to be, it's always going to be the case. Now, again, if you're using a post processor that recognizes an automatic tool changer, when you go to save G-code, let's select all three of these. When you go to save G-code, that's when you can change the order. Now, my post processor does not recognize an automatic tool changer. Okay. So it's telling me now these will not be saved. Okay. Simply because it's using different tools with different geometry. And, well, for instance, these two both use tool number 1, whereas if I had an automatic tool changer, these tool numbers would be different. Okay. So mine just simply won't let me save this as to one piece of G code. Just personal preference. I prefer not to do that anyway. I would prefer to save this as 3 separate pieces of G code. And that's simply because that puts me in control. I decide how much I'm going to do right now. So if I have time to do all of this, it's no big deal to me to take one piece of G code that I've already run out of my controller software, load the next G code, put in the bit, set my Z0, and go. It's no big deal to me. So but I decide if I have time to do these 2 clearance tool paths, but not enough time to do the final V-carve, I can run these 2, shut it all down, go in the house, do what I got to do, come back out, and then run my last tool path. I say that after I just told you I run the V-carve first, but you get the message. I like to be in more control. So let's see. Trent Hamilton says, nice tip. Never thought about running a V-bit first. Always just assumed clearance was first so the V-bit wouldn't crash or be able to keep up. About the only time you have to worry about that, Trent, is if you are, for instance, if I were going to V-carve something down, well, down inside that this pocket here, if I were going to carve something down in the bottom of that pocket, then I would have to be concerned with crashing over here. Maybe, maybe not. So it just it depends. If you've got a particularly deep pocket, you would have to be concerned with a crash anyway. And you'd have to use a bit that would reach down in there and wouldn't give you a bunch of tool deflection. But generally speaking, if you're flat carving into the surface of material, I run the V-carve, the V-bit first, and then come back and do my clearance pass. A.L. Peleg says, possibly, Mark, if you have numbered the tools differently, maybe your post processor would stop for a manual tool change. No, my post processor, even though it uses different tool numbers, it will come up and say the geometry is different. And that's simply because my post processor does not recognize an automatic tool changer. If it does recognize an automatic tool changer, it will do it. It will save it all to one G-code file. This is really getting in the weeds. And then it will give me time for a tool change. I don't like to do it that way for the reasons I outlined. I want to be in control of when I run that toolpath. I have no need for an automatic tool changer. So I'm not going to get one. So I don't see any reason to have one. Just a lot of money for something that I'm not going to use. So let's see here. We had another. Okay. Greg Hammer says, howdy, Greg. To do that, you need to make sure you're running with a flat depth, right? That was the next thing I was going to get into. You do have to have a flat depth selected in your toolpath to even use this. Okay. If I turn off the flat depth and I calculate the toolpath, what's going to happen now? I'll reset the preview. What's going to happen now is I'm still going to be able to use these two tools, but it's going to change what those tools clear out. So my first toolpath is just going to basically take one quick swipe, two quick swipes this way. And this is going to clear out a little bit here. We'll preview that. Whoops, I just previewed all of them. Well, I previewed this. Reset preview. That's the one I want to preview. Come on, Mark. So that's all that's going to clear out. Then I can come in and use this one, and that'll clear out a little bit more. And now my V-Carve is going to clear out the remainder and give it that finished V-Carve look. Now, if we take a look at how deep that's going to cut, I put my cursor down in this trench, for a lack of a better term. Look at my readouts right down here. Pay attention to the Z. Look how deep we're cutting. We're cutting 0.45, 0.46, I saw, 0.47, 0.4779. So not quite a half inch, but pretty deep. If I want to know exactly how deep that's going to cut, I can just put my cursor right there, and we can see in that little bubble, 3 lines up from the bottom, the max depth it's going to cut is 0.4851. That's going to be carving pretty deep. Now, that may be the look that I'm looking for, and that may work out just fine. And then we get into the situation where the V-bit would be the last thing I run. Because the whole reason for these clearance toolpaths is to hog away most of the material to make it easier work for that V-bit. So in this situation where I'm not using a flat depth, I would run the V-bit toolpath last. We may have some problems with inside angles like this. We may not. Usually we don't. But if I reset this, then come back and preview that toolpath, we can see how much material that's already removed. That's already made for a lot lighter work for that V-bit. Then I look at this one. That's made it even lighter work. All that V-bit needs to do is come in and make a couple of passes here, and then come out and clean up and do my square corners. So that's the whole reason for clearance, is to make life easier for your V-bit. So we'll go ahead and we'll preview that, and that's where we get that deep beveled look, that deep chiseled look there. So let's see here. There were some other. Bill Coleman was saying, can you change the order in the toolpath window? Yes, you can. Right here, you can change the order if, for instance, you want to preview all toolpaths. We can, I've got V-Carve 1 selected. I can bump it up to, and then yes, I would want to go with the 1/4 inch bit, then the 1/8 inch bit. So now if I preview the visible toolpaths, that's still in the wrong position. Well, that's all right. If I go back to my flat depth, 0.01, calculate, reset the preview. Now if I preview my visible toolpaths, and let's slow the speed down a little bit so you can see that it's actually doing them one at a time. Now it'll do the V-bit first, then come in with the 1/4 inch, and then with the 1/8 inch. So yes, you can change these positions as well. So, but this affects really the preview only. I still get the same end result if I try to save the G code. And all this is what I was talking about. These two tool paths right here both use tool number 1, but the geometry of the tools are different. So it does take tool 1 into consideration, but that's not the defining factor. The defining factor is the geometry of the tools. So that's why it wouldn't let me do it. It didn't have anything really to do with the tool number. So now, you also said, Eyal, using multiple bits would be helpful if you have multiple areas where significantly different size bits can enter. It would be a matter of how much time you save versus the bit takes to change time. Yes, absolutely. As an example, let me go back over to my good old pirate here, where you have areas like this in this area right here, and this is just a V-bit, a V-Carve toolpath. You have this selection here. That's a big area. So using a 1/4 inch end mill would clear this out really fast. But that 1/4 inch end mill is not going to get up in here. So I would use an 1/8 inch end mill to get up into these points a lot closer. Then in the case of this pirate, if we look at all the tool paths I have, this area right here, I'm using a 15-degree V-bit. So I want that 1/8 inch tool path to get up in here as close as it can, so that little 15-degree V-bit isn't spending a lot of time clearing everything out. I can see my 1/4 inch end mill can do all of this out here. And then my 1/8 inch end mill can get up tighter into these corners. Now, if I have more vectors up here that use the same bits, the software knows to calculate those tool paths for those areas that that bit can fit into. It's not going to try to force anything. So that's where it comes in real handy, is where you've got a large amount. Whoops, I added the wrong one there. Where you have a large number of fine tight areas or a large number of vectors spread out over a huge section. So that's where all of that comes in very handy. Yes, IL, I can change the tool number of one of them. Let's do this one. And I've got my 1/8 inch end mill selected. There, I've changed the tool number, calculate it, select all three, and it still won't let me change. It still won't let me both use tool 1. Well, we know that's not the case because I just changed that. Nope, I didn't accept it. That's right. Tool 1, 2, 3. Okay. Did it go back to tool 1? Come on. Well, let's try. Let's see. Both use tool number 3. What did I do? Did I make that mistake? 1/4 inch end mill. Edit. Let's make that tool 5. Okay. Now let's go into my 1/4 inch, and that's tool 1. Okay. All right. Close that, and it doesn't matter. Oh, that will save it to one tool path. Wow. I guess that post processor does recognize an automatic tool changer. Well, I learned something. I still don't want to do it simply because I want to be in control. I want to be in control of when these tool paths run. This is not dependent on the software. This is dependent on your post processor. Okay? If you want to save all of your tool paths to one piece of G code, be my guest. I don't do that. I will not do that. So that surprises me that it did that, because normally with different geometry, it will not allow you to do that. Wow. Well, I learned something. It's not for automatic tool changer. It will probably put a manual tool change G code in this scenario. It will put a manual G code tool change. That's up to how you have your software set up, your controller software. That is it's for an automatic tool changer. What your controller software does with that tool change G code is dependent upon how you set it up. You can set up that controller software. We're really getting in the weeds here, getting away from the basics. You can set up that controller to treat this as a manual tool change, but you can also set it up for an automatic tool change if your machine is so equipped. It's going to throw the same M codes. It'll be the same M codes. I want to say, now I'm not even going to quote. I want to say M5, but I don't know. I don't remember if that's it. Again, I don't have an automatic tool changer. I see no need to get one, so I haven't explored it. Let's see. For Greg, we were talking earlier Oops, wrong one. We were talking, there it is. We were talking earlier about a flat depth. Okay. What a flat depth does, a flat depth restricts how deep the tool is going to carve. It will not force your tool to cut deeper. Okay. If, for instance, you're using, this is 4-inch high text. If I was going with 1/4-inch text, 1/4-inch tall instead of 4-inch, and 1/4-inch is roughly 6 millimeters, thereabout, a little bit more. This 90-degree V-bit would cut very, very shallow. And these narrow lines here, it may or may not even scratch the surface. You cannot use a flat depth to make a bit cut deeper. All a flat depth will do is restrict how deep it can cut. It will not force it to cut deeper. There are ways you can make it cut deeper. You can add a start depth of, let's say, 0.20, and that will make this toolpath carve 0.020 deeper, because you're telling it you want it to start carving that deep. Generally speaking, unless, well, I'll just show you what that looks like. Unless you plan on surfacing a lot of this away, that's generally speaking not a very good thing to do. But it unless you're going to be surfacing material, but it can be done. So let me just preview the V-Carve to see what that looks like. Now that forced that bit to carve 20 thousandths deeper. And it doesn't really look all that bad until you zoom in and you start seeing that your sharp corners are not quite as sharp as they were. Your sharp external corners have a little bit of a radius because that tip is only going to go up until it's that 0.020 below the perceived surface of the material. It's not going to come up and all the way out. And this is more dramatic when you, the deeper you go. It can also force letters to kind of blend into one another. If I had, let's say for purposes of discussion, a letter I sitting right here, it could cause these serifs to blend in with one another so that there's no space between the letters. So it can be done. Generally speaking, though, there's no reason. The basic rule of thumb is, and has always been, if you need a V-Carve to cut deeper, you need to switch to a bit with a shallower angle. What I mean by that is, go all the way to the beginning. Here we go. This is a 90-degree V-bit, and this is a 60-degree V-bit. The lower the number, the steeper this angle. The higher the number, the more shallow this angle. This is a 90-degree V-bit, meaning from this corner right here up to the tip and then back down to the other side, that's 90 degrees. On the 60-degree V-bit, from this corner here to the tip and then back to this corner here is 60 degrees. I have 90, 60, 30, and 15-degree V-bits. So you can imagine what that looks like. 15 degrees they will bite. So when you have one chucked up in your spindle, be careful around the tip of that V-bit. They bite. In using a steeper V-bit, we have to get into how the software calculates the toolpath for it to make a whole heck of a lot of sense. Now, this is one I used in my previous video on my V-carving for the absolute beginner. And the point that I was trying to make is, this is a representation of a 90-degree V-bit, and this is a 60-degree V-bit. If these cut to the same depth, let's say 1/4 of an inch deep, about 3 millimeters, plus or minus a little, the 90-degree V-bit is going to cut a trench, for lack of a better word, about a 1/2 inch wide. But with using a 60-degree V-bit cutting to the same flat depth, it's going to cut about 1/4 of an inch wide because that angle is steeper. By the same token, if you have an area that's 1/2 inch wide, or roughly 12 millimeters, that V-bit, that 90-degree V-bit, will cut that same width a lot shallower than a 60-degree V-bit will. So if your 90-degree V-bit is cutting too shallow, you need to switch over to a 60-degree V-bit and preview that. If you use too steep of an angle to where it's going to cut through the backside, the software will warn you. You will get an error message, and I'll demonstrate that error message. Now watch, it won't do it. I'll preview this. I'll come in and I'm going to remove the clearance tools. I'm going to change my V-bit to my, I believe it's this. No, it's my 15-degree V. That's the one. I'll select my 15-degree V-bit, and I've removed my clearance tools. And I'm going to take off the flat depth. So it's going to cut as deep as it needs to go to clear this entire letter M out. We'll calculate. It's telling me here that without a flat depth, the tool is going to have to cut 3.6 inches deep to carve out this entire letter M. And my material is only 3/4 of an inch deep. So you will get this error message. It'll still let you calculate it, and it'll still let you preview it. And it's just going to take it forever to carve all the way down, but it will start cutting through the material. While we're waiting for this to demonstrate, Mario Montoya says, I use a start depth of 0.01 when clearing a surface after epoxy. Yes, I generally speaking, I do about the same, 0.01. It just depends on what I'm carving. So, if you cut a pocket in V-Carve, then you would use the start depth of the top of the pocket. Yes. If you are going to V-carve down into a pocket, you cut the pocket first, then again let's go over here, place your cursor down in that pocket, and take that Z readout depth. That will be your start depth. And I'll demonstrate that in a minute. This is going to take forever. We're 13 minutes in, but you get the point. It will still let you calculate that, but it's going to cut through the material. And it's told you that. So pretty much, if you're using too steep of an angle without a flat depth, it's going to warn you that you're going to cut through the material. Okay. Yes, and AL said for completeness, M5 is stop spindle, M6 is tool change. Yes. And then you set up your controller software. If you have a place you want your spindle to move to park while you're doing that tool change, most control softwares have that option. So, and then M6 is started again. Basically, after you've completed the tool change, set your Z0, you run from here and off you go. At least that's the way mine is set up. But again, I don't use that. So I could use the 15-degree V-bit, but I would also need to use clearance tools with a 1/4-inch end mill. Select you a flat depth of 0.1. Calculate it, making no other changes. And then we'll preview those visible tool paths. So the clearance bit will go in and clear out. Then my V-bit will come in and get what it can. That is how that entire pirate was created. And that was using the 15-degree V-bit as well. So this is going to take a while, but what you'll end up with is a steeper V-carve along the sides. And that may be the look that you're looking for, and that's fine. But again, if it were me running this tool path, I would be running the V-carve first, just to make sure I didn't have any problems with these outside vectors. This really comes into play when you're doing something like this pirate and you have a lot of thin pieces out here that could be broken loose, something like this. Imagine trying to V-carve along that edge to leave this standing proud. Better to V-carve around that first and then clear out everything else afterwards. That way you're not trying to run a V-bit along this thin, narrow, delicate piece. That's where running the V-carve, the V-bit toolpath first really comes into its own. So that was a lot of information that went a lot deeper into the weeds than I thought it was going to go. Nigel Mangrove says for manual tool change, it's best to have your tools stick out the same for every tool. If you can do that. If you can do that. Most home hobby CNC machines, I won't say most, but I'll say a good percentage of home hobby CNC machines don't have that option. We don't have a fixed touch plate and a mobile touch plate. Very few, in fact, I can't think of any that do. You could add it and then set up your controller to take advantage of it. But most of them don't come with that at all. So let's see here. Let's get into some questions. We have a question here from Mike Healy. It says using a 1/4-inch 60-degree V-bit with a 1/8-inch clearance bit, V-bit toolpath first. The bottom looks perfect, but the sidewalls show a line at each level the V-bit goes down. Is this normal when using a smaller diameter V-bit on a wider vector? Okay, so you're using a smaller diameter V-bit on a wide area. That can happen. Generally speaking, well, there are a couple of factors that come into play here. Okay, because it's a narrower diameter. Let me go back into a spire here, and we'll get away from the pirate. Let's just use this example here. Go back to my 2D view. The bit is if your bit is a smaller diameter than the width from here to here, let's say, it's going to have to make this profile pass in a couple of passes. Okay. Something with a larger diameter may be able to do that in one pass. It's not guaranteed. So there are other variables in there, the rigidity of your machine. But another big one that a lot of people don't take into consideration is when you say, for example, you're using a 90-degree V-bit. That 90 degrees is a nominal measurement. That the angle here on this cutter may not be exactly 90 degrees, but your software doesn't know that. Your software is assuming this is correct and this is 90 degrees. Well, what if that particular bit came out of the factory and that edge was ground at 89.5 or 88.2 or whatever? That does happen. For instance, I have one 90-degree V-bit that is 90 degrees, but another one that is 89 degrees. So what do I do with that in that case? Well, Peter Pasqualo, over on his channel, CNC Nuts, has a great video on checking the angle of your cutters, of your V-bits, to include free files that you can download from his website that has a test file. It's a CRV file, so it'll work in V-Carve or Aspire, that uses either a 90-degree V-bit or a 60-degree V-bit. But he also shows you how to set up your own file in case you want to check your 30 or your 15-degree V-bit. Now, for those of you who joined after about a quarter till the top of the hour when we started this, if you joined after that time, you'll find a link to that video down in the description of this live stream. If you joined us before that, you'll have to refresh this page and take a look down in the description because I've added a link to Peter's video on how to check the angle of your bits. And he shows you how to do it. He shows you how to create the file if you want to modify for 30 or 15-degree V-bits or any other angle for that matter. And it does work. I got in and I checked my 90s, and that's how I found one of them is actually 89 degrees and not 90 degrees. Another thing to take into consideration, another variable, is the tram of your router or spindle. If your spindle is not straight up and down, perpendicular to your spoil board, if it's tilted just slightly, that will also leave a line around the inside of a V-carve, because the bit, this is exaggerated of course, is cutting like this. Then it comes down and cuts like this. So that tip is going to leave a slight line. Okay. So there are many variables that would be causing the condition that you're talking about. So, all right. That's about it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. If there are any further questions, please put them down in the comment section after we're finished live here today. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, by all means, put them down in the comment section after we're done here live. Next week, I don't know what I'm going to do. That's going to be up to y'all. I base these videos on questions I get from you. On a related note, as I said earlier, most of my excuse me, most of my videos that I've done, like my V-Carve for the Absolute Beginner series, were done on older software. I am seriously considering redoing a lot of those videos with this newer software. Having said that, that's a lot of videos to make. I'm not sure that I'm going to be doing it anytime soon, but you may see them start to trickle out here and there. I won't be getting rid of the old videos. I'll be adding to those playlists with updated versions as techniques, forms, and the software itself has changed. So you can look out for that. But other than that, we'll see what happens. So, thank you very much for spending part of your Sunday with me. Again, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, don't hesitate to leave a comment down in the comment section. Channel members, remember, tomorrow, the members only live stream, I'm going to be going through, as promised last week, I'm going to be doing that 3D dish and showing you a couple of cool little tricks that you can do with the bottom of that 3D dish to make it look a little bit more professional. And we'll get into all of that. I've got the file loaded up, ready to go. If you don't know what the heck I'm talking about, or if you want to do as scroll back up and find you guys, Marco Silva and Madra 3212, if you want to be just like them, click that little join button down there next to the subscribe button. A panel will pop up and a video play that'll tell you all about channel membership. No obligation, totally up to you, but we have a great group of very talented people who love to share their projects, and we get into some real good discussions. So, channel members, check the community tab here on my Facebook. Are you kidding me, Mark? You've been doing this for a week or two. Check the community tab over here on my YouTube page, and you'll find the link to tomorrow's members only live stream. For everybody else, I will see you next week. I'll figure out something devious for us to get into. And y'all take care. Got about a little more than a week. Then it's really getting close to it. Don't mean to be adding to your stress. So take care. And I'll see you next week. Have a good one.